Top 12 mysteries we can't believe were solved. Welcome to our voyage into the world of real-life puzzles. Today we are diving into the top 12 mysteries we can't believe were solved. Our first mystery is a serial killer called the Phantom of Heilbronn, who evaded capture for 15 years. Known only by her DNA and the name Phantom of Heilbronn, an unidentifiable woman was connected to more than 40 crimes and 6 murders between 1993 and 2009. Her genetic fingerprint was found at crime scenes throughout Germany and Austria, and she appeared to have ties with multiple diverse accomplices, including Albanians, Romanians, Iraqis, Serbs, and Slovaks. One of the mysterious woman's victims was a 22-year-old police officer, spurring a detailed investigation in an attempt to gain any information regarding her whereabouts. Considered the country's most dangerous woman, she was never caught on camera, identified by surviving victims, or betrayed by co-conspirators during police interrogations. The case finally broke open in 2009 when investigators realized that the unidentifiable perpetrator remained elusive because she never actually existed. Authorities first grew suspicious when the Phantom's DNA was found on a person's body who had perished in a fire. Upon more extensive research, they eventually tied the mysterious DNA to an innocent woman who worked in a factory manufacturing cotton swabs in Bavaria. Next, we have the name of the boy in the box, which took 65 years to be discovered. The discovery of the so-called boy in the box sent shockwaves throughout the US in 1957. An apparently beaten and murdered child was discovered in a box on the side of a road in Philadelphia. Who was he, and who had killed him? It would take 65 years for authorities to find an answer to at least one of the questions. As Forensic reported, investigators kept coming up short on evidence that might point to the boy's identity. Forensic scientists and investigators employed many avenues of possible identification in 1957, including newspaper ads, posters, and footprint matching. Police spoke to local hospitals under the assumption the boy had at least one surgery thanks to intravenous marks found on his arm during autopsy. They also checked orphanages and foster homes. The medical examiner's officer dressed the boy and released postmortem photographs, hoping to trigger someone's memory. They also made a death mask that was brought along whenever there was a potential lead. DNA testing finally gave investigators the break they were looking for. In December 2022, they could identify the boy in the box as Joseph Augustus Sorelli, who was only 4 years old at the time of his demise. No one ever reported him missing in 1957, an unsettling fact that likely made investigators' jobs even more difficult. On the third spot, we have Australia's greatest mystery, the identity of Somerton Man, which was finally solved after 74 years on December 1, 1948. The body of an unknown man was discovered on a beach around Adelaide, Australia. Lacking any identification, the man quickly gained a new popular identity in the press, Somerton Man, named for the beach where he had died. For decades, people speculated about the man's identity and the circumstances surrounding his death. Some even theorized he may have been a Soviet spy, thanks to the discovery of seemingly random letters scribbled on the pages of a book the man had on his person. But all of the questions were finally laid to rest in 2022, when DNA evidence finally identified Somerton Man. Though the man was buried in 1949, authorities had taken a plaster cast of his face, and some hairs from his body stuck on the plaster. Investigators used these follicles to extract his DNA and locate his living relatives. Somerton Man was actually Charles Webb, a 43-year-old electrical engineer. Our next mystery is the abduction of Melissa Highsmith, who was reunited with her family 51 years later. In 1971, Alta Apantenko hired someone to babysit her 22-month-old daughter Melissa while she worked during the day. She had never formally met the babysitter. She connected with her only after the woman responded to an ad Apantenko had put in the newspaper. When Apantenko returned from work on August 23, 1971, there was no sign of the babysitter or Melissa. The sitter, it turned out, had given Apantenko a false name and fled with Melissa. What had happened to them? Incredibly, Melissa was reunited with her family 51 years later after her biological father took a commercial DNA test. The test matched him with Melissa, whom he contacted. As the news reported in 2022, when her family reached out to her on Facebook, Melissa thought it was a scam at first. "My father texted me on Messenger and he told me, 'You know, I've been looking for my daughter for 51 years. The happy reunion puts to rest a mystery that hung over the family for decades. We continue with Amanda Berry calling 911 and saving herself. Amanda Berry was nearly 17 years old in 2003 when Ariel Castro abducted her while she was walking home from work. He imprisoned her in a room in his home. Castro was already holding one woman captive, Michelle Knight, and would soon abduct one more, Gina De Jesus. Castro abused, tortured, and sexually assaulted them. A few years into Berry's captivity, she gave birth to a baby girl. 10 years later, Berry miraculously found a way out. Castro had left the house but had not locked the room where he imprisoned the women. Berry managed to make her way to the house's front door, but it was locked, as Berry told NPR host Terry Gross. "The neighbor next door, he saw me waving my hand down and I'm kind of going crazy on the door. He was just looking at the door to figure out something. So he kind of kicks the bottom. So I kicked it out a little bit more, just enough so I could fit through there. And I climbed out, and then I had my daughter climb out and we were free." Once free, Berry immediately called 911 and identified herself as a missing person. Knight and De Jesus were also freed when police arrived at the home. Castro was arrested and sentenced to life in prison. He committed suicide shortly thereafter. Our number 6 is Otto Sanhuber, who agreed to be locked up in his lover's attic for decades. It may have seemed like Walburga Dali Österreich was living the American dream. Originally from a poor German immigrant family, she gained wealth when she married her husband Fred, who owned an apron factory in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But the couple wasn't happy. In 1913, a relatively mundane meeting would change everything. After Dolly's sewing machine went on the fritz, Fred sent 17-year-old Otto Sanhuber, a factory worker who dreamed of being a writer, to the Österreich home to repair it. Dolly apparently seduced the young man, and the two began an affair. To keep the relationship secret, the lovers hatched an unsettling plan. Sanhuber would live in the Österreich's attic and would come out during the day when Fred was at work. This clandestine arrangement continued even when the couple moved to Los Angeles. Their new home, Dolly insisted, needed an attic. And so, like a phantom, Sanhuber moved into yet another attic to be with his mistress. Fred eventually discovered the affair, after which Sanhuber fatally shot him. Dolly managed to convince the police that her husband was the victim of a home invasion gone wrong. With Fred out of the picture, the secret lovers could openly be together. Instead, however, they fell back into their familiar routine of Sanhuber living in the attic. It continued like this, even as Dolly took additional lovers. Finally, in 1923, her lawyer-turned-lover forced Sanhuber from the house. Why did he agree to stay in the attic for so long? And why did he prefer it to a different kind of life? No one knows. Next up, we have a podcast that was key in an arrest on the Kristen Smart case. In 1996, California Polytechnic State University freshman Kristen Smart did what many college students did that Memorial Day weekend. She partied. It would be the last night her classmates would see her alive. Smart disappeared. The last person to see her had been Paul Flores, a fellow student at the school. Police did not arrest him for the crime, despite a number of suspicious elements in Flores' story, including a mysterious black eye that he had. In 2019, podcaster Chris Lambert created a series about Smart's disappearance in order to shed light on the case once more. It became incredibly popular and soon raked in millions of listens. As Kate Story reported for Vanity Fair, the swift success of Lambert's podcast attracted the attention of the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Department. Lambert began a working relationship with the Sheriff's Department, telling them about sources who'd reached out to him through the podcast and offering to let law enforcement interview the sources first. Suddenly, the Smart case was moving again, quickly. In April of 2020, Lambert's sources told him to get to the Flores home immediately. The street had been blocked off and was flooded with police officers. A search warrant had been issued for the home of Paul Flores, and the sheriff's office confirmed they were looking for specific items of evidence. What had the police discovered at the Flores home? Blood and evidence that something like a casket had been buried under the deck. Though the blood was too degraded to test for DNA, it was enough for police to arrest Flores and bring him to trial. In March 2023, a jury convicted him of Kristen Smart's murder. On our number 8, J.C. Dugard's kidnapper finally slipped up. J.C. Dugard was only 11 years old when she was abducted near her California home in 1991. Her abductor was 40-year-old Philip Garrido, who had previously spent over a decade in prison for sex crimes. Garrido imprisoned Dugard in a shack on his property in Antioch, California, 170 miles from where he had abducted her. For 18 years, Garrido sexually assaulted Dugard, told her lies, and kept her captive. Garrido's wife Nancy aided and abetted Dugard's captivity. When Dugard had 2 children, they delivered them. The truth of Dugard's abduction finally came out in 2009. Garrido and Dugard's 2 children went to the University of California at Berkeley's campus, and university officials soon became suspicious that the children were victims of abuse. As the university police officer Ale later reported, Jacobs did not have a basis on which to make an arrest. But when the man left, she called his parole officer in Concord, California, recommending that he check up on Garrido. When she came to work Wednesday morning, she had a telephone conversation with the parole officer, who seemed surprised to hear about the girls. Garrido didn't have any daughters, he asserted. My heart dropped. These are kidnapped kids, Jacobs recalled thinking. Though the kids were not kidnapped, they were Dugard's children. Jacobs's tip prompted officers to check on Garrido. This tip kick-started a sequence of events that ultimately led to the discovery of Dugard. In the years since her rescue, Dugard has spoken out in an attempt to reclaim the narrative about her life. In 2011, she published her memoir, A Stolen Life, and included these sentiments. One reason I decided to write this book is that Philip Garrido believes no one should find out what he did to an 11-year-old girl, me. He also believes he is not responsible for his actions. I believe differently. I believe that everyone should know exactly what he and his wife Nancy were doing all these years in their backyard. I believe I shouldn't be ashamed for what happened to me, and I want Philip Garrido to know that I no longer have to keep his secret, and that he is most certainly responsible for stealing my life, and the life I should have had with my family. Next up, we have Jacob Wetterling's killer, who admitted his crimes while being questioned on an unrelated charge in 1989. Jacob Wetterling was 11 years old when a masked man abducted him in St. Joseph, Minnesota, while Wetterling, his brother, and friend were on their way home from the video store. Though authorities quickly responded to the abduction, they never found any sign of Wetterling or the man who abducted him. Decades later, the truth would come out. In October 2015, police arrested a Minnesota man named Danny Heinrich for child pornography. In the course of questioning, he admitted to killing Wetterling and identified the boy's burial location. Number 10. A ghost ship on Lake Superior was just an optical illusion. In October 2016, videographer Jason Asselin hired someone to produce an alternative rock music video and captured a haunting sight while filming on Lake Superior. He had just finished shooting for the day and was relaxing during the golden hour. As the sun began to set, he captured what appeared to be a massive ghost ship sailing toward the shore. According to Asselin, it remained in his shot for half an hour before it finally disappeared. Because more than 6,000 ships have sunk and disappeared in the lake's vast depths, ghost ship stories are fairly common tales from the area. Still, this one actually appeared to be caught on video. In reality, Mark Becker, an associate professor of psychology at Michigan State University, explained that the image was an optical illusion produced by the Granite Island Lighthouse 8 miles away. Because the footage only shows water and the ghostly image, the human brain can't use depth perception. In the same way the moon often looks larger than it really is as it rises on the horizon, the lighthouse produced the same eerie optical illusion. We continue with the abduction of Sherry Papini, where DNA technology revealed that Sherry Papini was kidnapped by Sherry Papini. 3 weeks after Sherry Papini's November 2016 disappearance from Shasta County in Northern California was reported, she was found along a highway some 140 miles away. Injured and shaken, she said she was captured by 2 Hispanic women who tortured her, held her at gunpoint, branded her, and locked her in a closet. Authorities searched for the kidnappers for 4 years. Meanwhile, Papini received more than $30,000 in victim compensation funds from the government. When investigators finally cracked the case in 2020, the results were just as shocking as they were conclusive. DNA testing of Papini's clothing proved that her former boyfriend James Reyes had been with her during the kidnapping incident. When confronted, he confessed to playing a role in the planned kidnapping hoax. Supposedly running from an abusive relationship with husband Keith Papini, police never found evidence for such claims. She made her way to Southern California to stay with Reyes. When she arrived, she had cut her hair, was visibly injured, and asked him to brand her to make the story more plausible. Reyes' cousin corroborated the story, telling authorities he had seen the blonde woman in that area of Southern California. After phone records, gas receipts, work schedules, and toll records proved that Reyes was telling the truth, Papini still refused to admit she had staged the event. It wasn't until she was formally charged in March 2022 that she pleaded guilty to the false kidnapping scandal. Keith Papini filed for divorce and custody of the couple's 2 children. His wife was sentenced to 18 months in prison, followed by 36 months of supervised release. She also had to pay almost $310,000 in restitution fines. Our last mystery uncovered was the identity of El Dorado Jane Doe after more than 30 years. In 1991, Cheryl and Wick's boyfriend fatally shot her in El Dorado, AK. Though police quickly apprehended him, their investigation took an unexpected turn. Wick wasn't actually the woman's name at all. Even more confusingly, she had apparently used a number of fake identities over the years. What was her real name? Their trail quickly turned cold, and so the woman who had been killed in Arkansas became known simply as El Dorado Jane Doe. Decades later in 2022, forensic testing and a tenacious former police investigator would finally put the mystery to rest. Yolanda McClary, a 30-year veteran of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, whom About You described as the real deal behind the character of Catherine Willows on long-running network television series, CSI. Crime Scene Investigation took on the cold case. We have reached the end of our list. We hope you enjoyed the 12 mysteries we can't believe were solved. Subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for more mystery exploration.